fact, we're switching between Macs and PCs, and we're not quite as advanced as some of those alien cultures. Boris is an old friend and senior engineer at Northrop Grumman. He also is master's in, is it Indian Studies?
Asian Studies.
Asian Studies. But we always talk about Indian culture, and we've had these fascinating conversations, and I think he's done more in-depth work on the character and nature of the higher cultures than just about anybody I've met. So I hope he really gets into it. Please welcome Boris Fritz.
Thank you, Walter. It's just such a privilege to be here. And I've made so many friends at this conference, and it's so good to be back and to see all of you. Thank you for being here. And I spoke 3 years ago at CPAK 2006. How many of you were there for that conference? All right, that's a pretty good number. So I welcome to all of those who are new. And I wanted to make you go backwards in time, and one way to do that is all of you have had the feeling at some point in your life that all this violence, all these wars, all this brutality and people killing each other, that shouldn't be happening. Why is it happening? All of us in here, we don't want to kill anybody. You know, what's going on in this world? And then you hear about ancient times, you hear about these talks about the golden age, and when everyone got along, when things were absolutely wonderful, the harmony with nature and incredible powers of the soul. And then you think, oh, that's just myth. Well, now we're beginning to find out it's not just myth. And what's so exciting is to see that in India, more than anywhere else, we've preserved a lot of this knowledge. So I want to go into that and give you some ideas. Now, I can't go through the entire cycle, unfortunately. There isn't the time. But I would like to let you know that I'm planning a complete presentation that'll be on DVD and audio that will cover 3-4 hours. That'll be kind of like a Yuga 101. And that will be coming in the next few months. And so check the CPAK website. Also wanted to mention how many of you have been listening to Walter's radio show, or the recordings that are available for free on the website. Okay, all of you should get that. If you go to binaryresearchinstitute.org, click on the radio portion, and there's like 30 interviews by all kinds of people, like Graham Hancock and you name it. It's wonderful. In fact, Marvin Mills, who's speaking later on today, is also on there, and one of my interviews is there, and John Daring. So please check that out. Now, in ancient India, India and China are the only civilizations that made it through the Dark Age. And even though they lost a lot of things and some things got confused, they actually made it through, whereas like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and all these other ancient civilizations were lost, where no one knew how to read their writings anymore. In many cases, didn't even know they existed, because the Dark Age, people lose that perspective. So we're very fortunate to have a lot of this stuff still available. And even though some of it was destroyed by the Muslims when they came in, but still the amount of textual data that's available in India is absolutely phenomenal. So, and the Greeks also had very similar ideas, and the Iranians, and you see it all over. Walter mentioned Hamlet's Mill, that tremendous book that goes through 30 ancient civilizations, all talking about the importance of the precession cycle. And so all this is available to us, and a lot of the symbols that are interpreted in the scriptures in India, some of the scholars think, well, that's not, we can't really do that, and we should stick to the facts. Well, no, this Vyaskuta's knot points are vital to understanding ancient India. That's what India has been founded on. Even in ancient Vedic times, they say there are 4 different interpretations of the Vedas. And so obviously, these deeper interpretations are there, and this is where we get these Vedic keys that give us a way to characterize the ages. So Walter already mentioned Sri Yukteswar, and just to briefly mention Taramata, she wrote some articles on the yugas. She was the chief editor for Paramahansa Yogananda's works, and I've learned a lot from her, and also from Brother Dharmananda, one of the monks in the Self-Realization Fellowship. I led up discussions with him in the 1970s on the yugas, and that's where a lot of my knowledge comes from. Now, one of the things that's really important is how do we tie the yugas to history? How do we tie the cycle to history? And in the Manava Dharma Shastra, it makes it, that's the ancient laws of Manu, ancient texts, makes it very clear that it's really 24,000-year cycle. And then later in the Dark Ages, people tried to multiply that, all those numbers by 365, the years of the gods and all that. And it's true there are 2 larger cycles, but they don't make any sense in terms of our everyday history. We can't relate to them at all. So Sri Yukteswar made it clear this 24,000-year precessional cycle is what we need to base our history on. And where does it come from? How do we relate this to history? So he mentions, I was really amazed at this because he talks about 702 BC, which was the end of the Mahabharata war, and King Yudhishthira retires to the mountains with all his wise men because the Dark Age was coming. And so his grandson, King Parikshit, took over the throne. He didn't want people to know the Dark Age was coming. It was such a negative thing. So they, instead of restarting the calendar, which was the tradition in each age, when each age ended, you start again at year 0 and start again. Like you do each month, you start on the 1st through the 30th. So this tradition, they did not follow it. And so the 2,400 years of the Bronze Age or Dvapara Yuga kept going to 2401, 2402. And so what you find here is that if you add 3102 BC to 2009 AD, that whole period of time when the Hindu calendar first started, you get 5,111 Kali, what they call Kali Yuga in India, 5,111 in their calendar. Now, that's unfortunate because they forgot we're not in Kali Yuga. We're in the Bronze Age. We're 311 Dvapara Yuga in the Ascending Age. And the way this fits into history is phenomenal. And I'll try to show you some of that. But so after 3102, you go 2,400 years to 702 BC when Kali Yuga began. And at that time, instead of starting again at zeroing out the calendar, they went to 2401, 2402, and then just kept right on going till we ended up with today's date of 5,111. So, but the beauty is that in 3102, the Indians very well knew the precessional cycle, and they knew to start over at the end of the Silver Age. And not only was it critical at that time for the Indians that the Silver Age had ended, but the Mayans also date their calendar from 3100 BCE, or before Common Era, or BC, either one. And so do the Hebrews. So isn't that interesting? You know, this is the Americas, and they knew something special happened at that point. That was when telepathy ended, where people could communicate with each other directly, and that's when more violence began. And if anyone of you have heard of The Fall by Steve Taylor, he actually shows the archaeologists, after archaeologists and anthropologists, how they're all saying that there was no violence prior to around 4000 BC. And that is due to that higher age. When people commune directly with each other, you don't misunderstand each other, and you don't start saying, hey, this guy hates me, I think I saw him do this or that. No, when you have direct communication and you have one language, like Walter showed the Tower of Babel, that's when all the languages started, when people could no longer commune directly. So from here, let's just briefly look. Walter's already showed us the downgoing 12,000-year cycle, 12,000 years up. And then we have these transitions, like it's 4,800 years for the Golden Age, but then you have 400-year transition, then 4,000-year is the Golden Year proper, and then 400-year declining, and then you have 300 years here of transitioning into this age, and 300 years out, and going down like this. So, and then we come here, we hit rock bottom, which is 498 AD. Think of it, 500 AD. So now, why is all this happening? What is the purpose, in a sense, of God's plan? So you can think of the yugas tied in with cosmic evolution, how we go upward and downward, and people are able to have deeper understanding of consciousness and sense of closeness to God. And what's interesting, that at the time, if we go back to that last chart, just when we entered, we had the 200-year transition, and just when we entered the Dwapara Yuga proper, there was this man named Richard Buke, who wrote a book called Cosmic Consciousness, a study in the evolution of the human mind. A remarkable work. He was a close friend of Walt Whitman, and he made it clear that this sense of cosmic consciousness, which he experienced himself, which changed his life, he noticed happening more and more as the age progressed, and that something is happening in the evolution of man, and that's this upward cycle. And now, the other thing important to understand about the yugas and the cycle of the ages is that all these great cultures that we find, they don't just happen by chance. What happens is that some great being, either a prophet or a very advanced soul, actually, in a sense, brings down the conception of a new culture and makes it happen. And, or it might be several of them. And there's always at least one great prophet in each age that helps make that age either not be too bad when it goes downhill, or makes it go higher in the upgoing age. And in the downgoing age, you try to preserve what's at the top. And at the, in the ascending age, the prophets or a new religion comes to make us act like the next age, because you can't skip ages, it's too far, it's too advanced. And so you try to do what's normal in the next age that is to come. So right now, we're going to kind of look at this last downturning Kali age, the downgoing Iron Age, and we call the Dark Ages, and to see what happens here. Because something extremely important happened at this point, and all the historians are aware of it. They don't know why, but I'm going to tell you why. This has been my big insight I've had in the last couple of years since I gave my last talk. So I'm going to spend a little time on this. And I did my doctoral work in the history of religions, and the professor, chairman of my doctoral committee, always was saying, isn't it strange that all the ancient religions, they all did all the sacrifices, they focused on all these sacred acts, and then all of a sudden we get to like from 800 BC downward, all these new religions come, and they're completely different. Why would that happen? Well, first of all, you have three types of religious manifestations: sacred acts, sacred words, sacred places. And the focus here, you always have sacred places, but all the sacred acts in the old religions are replaced more by sacred words. Suddenly you have dogma, you have texts that you follow. People get excommunicated because they don't follow the words that are that you're supposed to believe in. So there's a big shift happening at this point. So, and what is that? The historians call it the Axis Age, but they don't know why all this changes from the ancient world religions of ritual to the ethics-based religions that come afterwards. And they're all the same way. It all happens this way. And imagine yourself in that ancient time when you're in the age before that, all the previous ages, people meditated. Just like we're now on the previous side, we are now coming back up here, where these people were here. We're starting to meditate and do spiritual things. People are doing, what do you call it, the Taoist exercises in the parks and things, and it's like Tai Chi. Thank you. So all this going on, all energy medicine and yoga. 18 million people are practicing yoga in the United States alone. This is what was happening in the higher ages, but in this age it got lost because people lose their inner attunement, and when you lose that inner attunement, you have no more inner guidance on what's right from wrong. And what happens in the higher ages, people in this attunement, they know how to interact with the cosmos and make sure that, like, if there's no rain, they can weave the energies with their inner power linking with the world to make rain fall and all kinds of things work in harmony. That's what's called cosmic maintenance. And that's not my word. This is what the scholars call it, cosmic maintenance religions. Isn't that interesting? So in that age, all of a sudden, these people going from the last higher age, where they were twice born, we call it, in India, the higher castes are the twice born. That is, they represent the higher ages, and the Shudra, the slaves, represent the dark age, being enslaved to the senses. So when you suddenly lose that inner attunement, then all this ritual and sacrifices become meaningless, and they become misshapen, like the Aztecs with their sacrifices. They're not connected to real things anymore, and they lose their meaning. And so people drop them. All these ancient religions were dropped for all these new ones, like Christianity and Islam, and the ones I'll get into here in a second. And so we go from attunement and meditation, we fall to body consciousness. And if you're in body consciousness, all this is only real in the senses, then you don't know right from wrong anymore. And so what happens? You need to have religions that guide you in this downgoing age on how to behave. And so obviously, like Zoroastrianism is the first religion that talks about good versus evil, life based on moral choices. And here's this word that the scholars use. I didn't make this up. Epathization. Everything is now understood in terms of moral behavior. And Jainism, you've heard of Mahatma Gandhi with ahimsa, doing no harm mentally or physically to another human being. Well, Mahavira, prophet of the Jains, he wanted to make sure that people understood that in this dark age that was coming, there'd be a lot of violence, so your focus has to be on not hurting anyone. And the other word, anekantvada, is many-sidedness. The idea is if you dogmatically just believe in your little religion and everybody else is a heathen, that's very arrogant, he says, because unless you're an enlightened being, you cannot know all these things. And so you need to respect other people's ideas, because he knew that time was coming. So he focused on that. Now Confucius, we all know, he taught us how to behave. He made an incredible impression on China, and their whole system of training in politics and all that was based on this morality. And Confucius even talks about golden age and when people didn't need these kind of guidance because they knew how to behave, because they had the inner realization. And so again, he has that, and then all that descends later into legalism because the age is falling down, and they feel like people are by nature sinful and unclean, same idea in China. Then legalism came along that the state had to use brute force to keep people in line. And that's a fall off because you get the highest teaching in the top of the age, and as you go down, it starts to deteriorate. And then in India, you go from Brahmanism to Hinduism. You see how it's happening everywhere? And Brahmanism was all the ritual, all the sacrifices, the Ashvamedha and all these, like horse sacrifice, all these things. And that transformed into Hinduism. And karma, you've all heard the word karma, it used to be, in the Brahmanism, was ritual action, whereas in Hinduism it becomes moral action. Again, ethicization, personal moral responsibility, because you needed guidance. So you need the good book, you need the Bible, you need the Quran to know how to behave. Whereas once you reach the point again in our new age where we begin to meditate, we begin to know inside what's right from wrong. You don't need anything else in that sense. And then even Judaism, with their temples, with sacrifices, that stopped as well. Isn't that amazing? And then Buddhism also came along, and they helped break up the caste system because people were born into different castes, and that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. It was just a classification of man in general. And also not much focus on ritual anymore. And some of you, like I always used to wonder, why is it that Buddhism and Jainism broke off from the authority of the Vedas? One simple reason is because Vedic truth from the highest age was so deep that both Buddha and Mahavira knew that in this dark age that's coming, people would just misinterpret it and misuse it, so let's stay away from it. And then also Taoism, as opposed to Confucianism, Taoism gave a deeper aspect. For those people who are ready for it, they could follow a deeper path. Just like Plato in Greece gave people logic, because logic is basic to this age. Legalism, logic, literal interpretation of the scripture, fundamentalism, that's all part of the dark age. I'm sure you can recognize those words. And so it's important to see that, you know, and like I mentioned, okay, Plato gave these guidelines to keep us at that high level. And of course, he was kind of, Plato and Aristotle were kind of lost in the lower part of the age and then resurfaced in the Renaissance because people in the lowest age couldn't quite handle it anymore. So everything just follows so closely, which is just amazing to me. And then in the descending Iron Age, we get, you know, when we start to hit rock bottom in 500 AD, before then, the Roman Empire ends, Chinese Han Dynasty ends, the Indian Gupta Empire ends, and they all decline due to barbarian invasions, unruly people, you know, no more connectedness to cosmic things, so a lot of violence, less capable rulers, economic stagnation, disease, unwillingness of citizens to serve in the army, and tax evasion. So that's how this plagued all those empires. And then 500 AD, everything collapses. All the knowledge of ancient civilizations are pretty much gone, except in China and India. Closing of Plato's Academy, even in the lowest part. Then come to the other parts of the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, where you have lack of sanitation, which is a sign of the Dark Age. Specifically, like castles had no toilets. And you had toilets in... when you go back to the last Bronze Age, when you look at Indus Valley civilization, they had toilets. The Minoan civilization in Crete, they had toilets. They even had flushing toilets, and all that disappeared. And then you don't get toilets again till Alexander Cummings invents the flushing toilet in 1777 during the transition period of our new Bronze Age. So it's just amazing how everything follows so closely. And then we come to the Iron Age transition, and I have to do this rather quickly, but you know, suddenly in that 100-year transition out of the Dark Age, you have Renaissance humanism, rise of centrally governed states, discovery of the New World, and within 26 years, you have Magellan's ships going all the way around the world. Very quick, incredible energy. Invention of the printing press, in 1450, a little bit earlier, but that took off. And you had printing in China before that, but the time, like, well, the time wasn't right. You had to have that energy that comes with the New Age to get things moving. And so you have the Protestant Reformation, because it was time to get out of the stagnant idea that only one idea is right. And, but the time, you know, and this turnover is so violent with all the energy that people just killed each other. Like within 50 years of the Protestant Reformation, half of Europe was Protestant. Now look at the energy there. No respect for religion came about till we actually entered, like in 1896, we had the first World Parliament of Religions. People started to work together again. Then, of course, the scientific revolution, you know, it's phenomenal at that time. Then we go on, all the trading. This is common to the next age, the Bronze Age. You have the sense of a business as a focus, and outer energy, outer exploration. And kind of interesting with all the trading, where do you think all the gold and silver from the New World ended up? It ended up in China, and secondly in India, which you'd never expect, because you think, oh, Spain would have all that money. No, China, they had no need to trade with us. They didn't want anything we had. So when we had finally gold and silver, we wanted their porcelain, we wanted their silk, so all that money went over there. You know, it hasn't changed much. Look at today, you know, made in China, you know, so some things just don't change. Then now to kind of characterize a little bit how this age works. Now, we're coming up here very quickly into the 200-year transition into the Bronze Age. And as I said, this science, outer exploration, this is the age where people, like we're discovering the atom and all that. And this is the age of rajas, passion, activity, with some of the tamas, darkness and inertia still from the Dark Age. It has to be overcome, kind of like mud being sloshed around. That's why I have so much violence still. We're going to see a little bit more of that until the end of this century, probably. Then focuses on merchants, on business. You know, nowadays you don't. It used to be in the Dark Age, 80 to 90% of the people worked in the fields, and only 10 to 20% were in towns. How many work the fields today? No, hardly anybody. It's all automated. See that change? That's what happens. And then what's common in this age is the focus in the 8 steps of Patanjali's Raja Yoga. Before, the focus was on moral behavior in religion, which you see very much in the religions of that age. But now we're starting to focus on yoga asanas, postures, tai chi, you know, and life force control, meditation. And also, this is the focus on space. This is one of the 4 qualities that characterize what happens in each age, what type of capability we have. Space refers to, you know, how the atom now is basically empty. There's really nothing, hardly anything inside there. That this wood is not real. I'm not really touching it. It's the electron shells of the electromagnetic forces that intercept each other that keeps me from my hand going through the table. So we have a whole new understanding. And then in terms of space also, it means that we're going to conquer outer space, and by the end of this age, we will go to the stars. And we're already the moon and Mars and visit some of the outer planets. So things are happening, and they're not going to stop. And you've noticed that, you know, just in the last 100 years, it's been phenomenal. First, we have some of these things here, kind of characterized right here. One of the important things is the end of slavery. The emperor in, what's his name, in Russia freed the serfs, 23 million serfs in 1823. Then in 1861, 1830s, the British and English colonies stopped slavery. But then 1863, I believe, Abraham Lincoln stopped slavery, and then China stopped slavery in 1910 or so. So slavery stops. So these are all signs it's happening around the world. And then international things. We're becoming a global civilization again. You know, we've forgotten that we were once. And now what's interesting too is that we wonder, like, how did the Soviet Union suddenly end? That's a very good sign that it ended without a shot. I expected, you know, that could be like Armageddon or something. And but the whole thing is that God has given us the freedom to change our future by the way we behave and by our attunement. And so there's been enough good done, even though we see a lot of evil, because we get to be, we get the news from all over the world now, so it sounds overwhelming. Well, we didn't get that before, and a couple of hundred years ago. So just be aware there's a lot of good going on as well, and a lot of good forces. And so for the Soviet Union to just dissolve, it just, you know, really floored me. And that's a good sign for things like 2012, right? You may think, like, you know, is everything going to end? No, I think, you know, we're going through that change right now, but it's going to be hopefully not very severe. And now, religion always follows what comes, in the next age. So what is going to be the religion in the next age that is reflected by the prophets of our time? Because it has to take us to the next level. And so right now, of course, everybody feels belief and dogma is no longer enough. There's no big excommunication going on anymore, that sort of thing. We want the experience of God. We're not interested in dogma. And so what's happening is that we have right posture, the asana, the yoga postures, and Tai Chi, and some of the martial arts, like from Japan. The flow and connectedness with the cosmos. Those things are happening now. And I wanted to give an example of Kriya Yoga as the next, the religion for this new age, to bring us to the next age, because Sri Yukteswar sent Paramahansa Yogananda to the West to bring this science. And actually Kriya Yoga and similar aspects of that I found in texts from the higher ages. Very interesting. They used to practice that because it has to do with the evolution of man, because you have the 6 centers in the spine that by polarity, front and back, make 12. That's the 12 signs of the zodiac. Spiritual eye is the sun, and as you circulate the energy through the spine, you're actually going through a whole year of evolution in one practice of this technique. And so in terms of evolution, you're advancing 1 year in half a minute, in 30 seconds. And so this is a technique that was known in the higher ages, and then it was lost, and now it's being brought back. And so we begin to focus on what's called Sankhya Yoga, techniques of spiritual inner development, that is pratyahara, which is withdrawing the senses from the outer objects so that instead of this world being real, the inner world becomes real to us. But it's by magnetizing the spine, all this energy gets sucked in like a big electromagnet, and you begin to discover your inner nature. And that's what's going to be common in the next age, in the Silver Age, and that's what we're, you know, looking at now. In these teachings. Now, some of the things that are coming right now, which are really remarkable, I just want to make it clear, you know, we're not stopping. Things are expanding and exploding with science. And science is a step in this direction that is necessary. Some people think, oh, we make too much focus on technology. Oh, maybe, but to get to the next level of mental powers, spiritual powers, we first have to go through the steps of outer technological powers, so to say, like the foglets here that one of my friends, he's a pioneer in nanotechnology, talks about how we're able to, like imagine the pixels on a TV screen and make them smaller than that, and they all interconnect with each other, and they can hold each other in different bondings of tightness or looseness, so it can feel like a soft, gushy carpet or a hard floor, but they're also in the air around you, so like if you're driving your car and you hit another vehicle, all the foglets around you that are like, seem like air that you're seeing through will suddenly tighten up gradually and completely contain you so you'd never get hurt. But also, when you have them in your house, they make up your bed. And so when all these things dissolve in the morning, they reform your couch and your living room and all that. And then let's say you're tired of, you want to go do something. My friend who helped me with some of the graphics, Kevin Bookbinder, he said, well, of course you want to go to Disneyland, but let's say you could just make your house into World of Warcraft and start playing the game for real, because this is not virtual reality where you have a helmet and you 3D glasses and that sort of thing. No, because in the World of Warcraft, the stuff you touch is real because the foglets have formed them. And so, we're entering a world that is where you don't know what's real, what's not real anymore. And this is happening very quickly. You're going to see a lot of that. And like, for instance, I don't have much time, but respirocytes, 10% of these in the blood that hold 234 times as much oxygen as a red blood cell, so that you can hold your breath for 4 hours. That's coming in the next 20 years, according to my friend who's working on it. He says it's not that hard. It's about the complexity of making a toaster, but at a smaller level. And he says that, like, say you have a heart attack and so your heart has stopped. You say, oh, shoot, I got a heart attack. And you call the hospital and say, listen, I've got to pick up some groceries first, but I'll be over in about an hour or so and just have everything ready. Because it doesn't matter, you got 4 hours because you got so much oxygen, with these respirocytes. So you can imagine how that's going to change. Then you go, no more scuba gear, you just go walking underwater, and you can even reprogram those respirocytes to absorb the nitrogen so you don't get the bends either. So, we're running out of time, but what's coming next, femtotechnology, some of that's already starting to happen with inside the atom. And then 2,000 years more of this age, what do you think is going to happen next when all this is already happening? And I should mention that programmable matter, you saw the movie, that's what those foglets are. That's programmable matter. And that's why we don't find things from higher civilizations, because if we won't have trash anymore. When you just reform everything for whatever you need, why would you throw anything away? There are no more dumpsters, okay? So that's why that's why we're not finding so much of some of the higher civilizations, because they make what they need. So we've gone from words now, we're going back to cosmic maintenance, from mental prayer, like mental thinking, to meditation and stillness. That's where we're going. And now we're about to go to lunch, so I just wanted to mention here a little exercise that Holly here at CPAK taught me. And this is, going back to ritual that used to be meaningless and senseless. Say, of course you say your prayer, be thankful for your food, but what you do is, let's say this is the food here, place your hand over it, and you feel the energy from your hand, the prana, the life force, interacting with the energy of the food, and you feel a blending. And when that blending is complete, takes about half a minute to a minute, you know you're done, and then the food is assimilable to your body. And like Edgar Casey, someone asked, and he told somebody, don't eat meat. And the guy says, well, I see you eating meat sometimes. He says, well, I know how to assimilate it to my body, the vibration, so I can use it properly. So that's what this is. So here you have a little exercise of what the higher age is like. And so last thing I want to end with was the difference of sin in the dark age as opposed to the higher ages. I asked this question to Brother Dharmananda years ago because I come from a Christian upbringing and I wanted to understand what he thought of sin. And this was very profound because I would not have, I did not know how deeply this affects the concept of the yugas. But what he said, and that's Brother Dharmananda there, he passed away this last year, so I'm very grateful to him for his help. But he told me, for the monks really, he said, sin means to think of oneself as a physical body. And that's it right there. As soon as you forget your cosmic connectedness and you're just a physical body, that's sin in the higher ages, because you've forgotten to be the twice born, to be born again, to be in that higher consciousness. And so some people have asked in the past here, what can we do to bring about this higher age? Well, the answer is daily meditation, daily stillness and awareness of God, till you're so saturated that you live in that. And when enough people do that, this whole world is going to be transformed, just like the 100th monkey thing. You will change the world, and we're doing that now, and all of you here are doing that. That's why I feel so close to all of you. This is just an incredible group, and I thank all of you. And that's it. Thank you very much.